Hello everyone and welcome to Hopeful Moments 1. Today, we will be sharing a story about an arrogant woman who tried to kick a homeless man named Tim out of the park, even though he was causing no harm and was simply relaxing in a public space. This woman displayed rude behavior, asking the police to intervene, but in the end, the truth came to light when a police officer, who knew Tim, confirmed that he had every right to be in the park, just like anyone else. Today's story will take you through a surprising situation. When the police, instead of siding with the arrogant woman as she had hoped, actually knew Tim and confirmed that he had the right to be in the park just like anyone else. The police officer not only rejected the woman's request but also warned her that she would be removed from the park if she continued to cause trouble. If you find this story interesting and filled with valuable lessons, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to learn more meaningful insights. This event happened a few months ago, and even though a lot of time has passed, I still can't forget that moment. It was one of those rare instances in life when the universe seemed to truly align everything fairly, bringing about great justice amidst an injustice that seemed impossible to change. I live in an area near a park where people from the neighborhood gather to relax, walk their dogs, or simply find a peaceful space to escape from the busyness of life. And almost every day, this park has also become a home for a homeless man I know. His name is Tim. Tim has lived near the park for quite a while, silently becoming an inseparable part of the area. To me, Tim is not just a homeless man, he is a figure of calmness and kindness, someone who brings peace to the space. Tim never bothers anyone. He's the quiet type, soft-spoken but highly respected, living his life without disturbing anyone around him. Throughout the time he has lived near the park, no one has ever heard him complain or beg. He keeps his space clean and tidy, with simple benches and a few blankets he brings to stay warm on cold nights. Each item in Tim's small space reflects a part of who he is, simple, independent, yet full of love for everything around him. On sunny days, when the warm sunlight shines down, Tim often sits on his bench, quietly observing the surroundings. The branches sway in the breeze, birds chirp cheerfully, and children laugh and play in the playground. All these images seem to be part of him. He isn't in a hurry, isn't anxious, but enjoys every moment of life, no matter how simple it may seem. His feeling here is as if this park is the only home he has, the only place he can find peace amidst the difficulties and uncertainties of life. Despite being homeless, Tim never caused trouble or gave the community a sense of burden. On the contrary, he always had the right attitude and was someone everyone in the neighborhood respected. He didn't seek attention, nor did he ask for any help from anyone. However, the respect and compassion that Tim gave to others made the community treat him with the utmost care. They didn't see him as just a homeless man, but as part of the community, a man with a unique life story that was inspiring. Many people in the neighborhood knew Tim and occasionally brought him food or cups of hot coffee, not because he asked for it or seemed needy, but because they felt he deserved care. These acts weren't just gestures. They were expressions of kindness and empathy, showing that in a world filled with rush and selfishness, there are still people willing to share even the smallest things with one another. Every time they handed him food, it wasn't just a meal, but a reminder of connection, that everyone deserves care and attention, even if they might not have a home or money. No one in the neighborhood saw Tim as a burden. On the contrary, he was accepted and respected as an indispensable part of the community. Tim's existence, though simple and humble, made everyone feel a deep sense of compassion, empathy, and the importance of living together in a harmonious community. Those around him didn't help Tim out of guilt or pity, they truly saw him as a person deserving of good things, no matter how harsh life could be. What impressed me most was Tim's attitude. In a world that is often disrupted by busy schedules and competition, where people easily lose patience and gratitude, Tim was an exception. He never asked for anything from others, never complained about his circumstances or felt deprived. Instead, he lived with deep respect and openness, always willing to accept whatever was shared with him without being unpleasant or dissatisfied. With every meal or cup of coffee someone brought him, Tim expressed gratitude in the simplest and most sincere way, a nod, a gentle smile, or just a warm thank you. He didn't need praise or recognition from others. The gratitude in his heart was enough to prove the dignity of a person. Despite living in difficult circumstances, lacking material wealth, Tim always exhibited a dignity that not everyone could maintain in his position. He didn't allow adversity to defeat him. On the contrary, he made those around him feel the strength in his soul. Tim didn't just exist in the park, he was a part of it, contributing to keeping it clean and tidy. Whenever the park had litter, even though no one asked, he would stand up and pick it up as if it were his responsibility to the community. These small actions, unassuming, unnoticed, but full of meaning, were a living testament to how Tim felt about the connection between himself and those around him. He didn't do it for applause or recognition, but because he understood that every small action could contribute to making the world a better place. With such an image, Tim became a living testament to peaceful existence in a world filled with noise and injustice. While society today often judges people by external factors like money, status, or power, Tim showed that dignity and kindness are the core values that make people great. He is a model of inner peace, a person living in harmony with himself and the environment around him, not affected by the hardships that life brings. But, as we all know, good and simple things often don't last easily in a world where everything faces challenges. And soon, all of Tim's goodness and simplicity will be tested by a woman with a completely different perspective on ownership and public space. In her view, this park is a space only for those with power, status, and the ability to pay for the services society provides. She doesn't understand that Tim's presence in the park is not an intrusion, but rather an affirmation that every person, regardless of their circumstances, has the right to live and enjoy peaceful moments in public spaces. This is the crux that creates conflict in the story, a conflict not only about public space, but also about how individuals perceive their rights and values in society. And from here, the clash between two different views of rights and human existence will gradually evolve into a larger story, a struggle for fairness and compassion in a world full of discrimination and prejudice. One day, while I was walking my dog around the park as usual, relaxing and enjoying the fresh air, a sudden scene caught my attention. Contrary to the usual peaceful atmosphere, in front of me was a rather unpleasant situation. A woman, with a demeanor and attitude that anyone could immediately recognize from a first glance, the type of person that as soon as you hear the name Karen, you know exactly who she is, was walking towards Tim. She wasn't just a woman walking in the park, she seemed to have a clear purpose. Tim, dressed simply, was sitting quietly on his usual bench, gently petting the little dog by his side. He wasn't bothering anyone, just silently enjoying the stillness and the cool space of the park. As I watched her approach, I immediately sensed something strange, something wasn't quite right. Although she walked with confidence, from the way she moved to her attitude and gaze, I could tell she was looking for a reason to cause trouble. She was holding an expensive yoga mat, something not everyone could afford, which caught my attention. The way she clutched the mat, as if it were the most precious thing she had, was a clear sign of self-importance and an attitude that everything around her must submit to her. She didn't just walk as a normal person would, but seemed to be displaying power, an arrogance she couldn't hide. Along with the yoga mat was a small dog held tightly on a leash, further emphasizing her control over everything. From her arrogant gaze to her confident strides, she wasn't just here to relax. Everything about her screamed that she was looking for conflict, as if she was searching for someone to take her anger out on, or at least a situation in which to assert her power. Her look seemed to say, "I control this space, and everyone here must follow my rules." I could tell from the way she walked, from her self-satisfied gait to the way she looked around as though she were the center of attention, that she wasn't here just to relax. She was clearly searching for a reason to cause a conflict. While this park was a public space, where everyone had the right to come and relax, she saw everything with an attitude of ownership, as if the park belonged only to her. And this immediately created tension. In moments like this, I couldn't help but wonder about the prejudices society still holds, views on power, ownership, and who is worthy to occupy these spaces. Tim, a homeless person, was not a part of the community she thought was proper or deserving of being in this park. Her gaze wasn't just an ignorance of Tim's situation, but a reflection of how society sometimes discriminates and creates invisible boundaries between people. While Tim was just a homeless man, simply trying to find peace in a public space, this woman saw him as an inconvenience, an obstacle in her space. Her view of Tim didn't just show a lack of empathy, but also reflected a misconception about ownership and the legitimacy of a person's place in society. She didn't see the value of Tim's humanity. Instead, she saw him as someone who had no right to exist in the space she considered her own. In that moment, it wasn't just a difference between individuals, but a collision between opposing worldviews on how we perceive and treat those less fortunate. With her actions and attitude, this woman wasn't just an individual, she embodied a society in which people like Tim, whether homeless or socially marginalized, are sometimes treated as outsiders, unworthy of a place in public spaces. Meanwhile, Tim, with his calmness and humanity, stood as a model of patience, gratitude, and dignity in difficult circumstances. The woman's gaze suddenly stopped on Tim, the homeless man sitting quietly on his bench, calmly observing the surroundings, not bothering anyone. It was a moment where the contrast between them became painfully clear. Tim, with no home and nothing but his bench and a few blankets, exuded an extraordinary sense of peace and simplicity. And there she was, with her arrogant gaze and posture as if she owned the entire park, carrying her expensive yoga mat and a small dog held tightly on a leash, as if everything here had to follow her rules. This contrast wasn't just on the outside, but sent a powerful message about power, control, and discrimination in society. I could feel the tension in the air. It felt like an inevitable clash was approaching. The woman's gaze was filled with contempt, not just looking at Tim, but seemingly evaluating the entire space around her, as if she saw this park as her own private property. This made me feel something was wrong, that everything in this space that didn't belong to her was something she wanted to push away, or at least control. She stopped right in front of Tim and began to criticize him harshly, as if every word she uttered was an unrelenting attack. She didn't just view this park as her own, but also gave herself the right to decide who could exist in that space. She told Tim that he shouldn't sit in her park and that his presence was ruining the scenery, a pollution of the beauty she considered valuable. Her words seemed not just to criticize one person, but to assert her power over the space, diminishing the worth of people like Tim. Words like "get a job" or "stop being lazy" weren't just insults but also reflected prejudice and discrimination. Each sentence from her seemed to imply that a homeless person like Tim had no right to exist in a public space simply because he did not exhibit the success society expected. Her voice was loud and rude, as if she wanted not just to criticize but also to draw attention, to attract the gaze of those around, as if she were performing an act of power. People in the park started turning to look, some expressing curiosity, others feeling frustrated by her behavior. However, in stark contrast to her aggression and noise, Tim remained astonishingly calm. He just sat there, not arguing, not responding with aggression, but simply explaining that he wasn't harming anyone and that he had the right to be in the park like anyone else. Tim's calmness in this situation not only displayed his wisdom but also reflected his patience and dignity in difficult circumstances. Although Tim spoke gently, it was clear that his words couldn't change the woman's viewpoint. She wasn't listening, didn't understand, and simply looked down on him, continuing to express her relentless attitude. To reinforce her imposition, she didn't hesitate to threaten to call the police, demanding they remove Tim on the grounds of trespassing, even though this was clearly a public park where everyone had the right to be. Her actions not only reflected a lack of respect for others but also revealed her stubbornness, an attitude that people like Tim didn't deserve to be in this public space. What's notable is that she didn't just see getting rid of Tim as an easy task but as a way to maintain order in her space, a space she believed should be submissive to the presence of people like her, not others like Tim. The contrast between these two characters, Tim and the woman, became even more apparent when she not only infringed upon the freedom of others but also displayed a way of exercising power, the injustice that many homeless people face daily. Tim, with all his calmness and humanity, never showed any weakness or failure. On the contrary, he remained the one to uphold dignity in every situation, while the woman exposed the flaws in how she viewed the world around her. While Tim remained composed and patient, she grew more agitated, stubbornly sticking to her point of view as if nothing could change it. The contrast between the two was so clear. One was calm and rational, and the other was aggressive, trying to impose her power on others, despite having no real power. The sense of injustice in her words further highlighted Tim's steadiness, as he refused to succumb to unreasonable criticism. A small group began to gather around because of the noise and commotion she was causing. People in the park couldn't help but stare at the scene, their eyes clearly showing discomfort and curiosity. Some of us tried to intervene, telling her to calm down and understand that this is a public park, where everyone has the right to freedom. But she paid no attention to our words. On the contrary, her attitude became even more challenging. She kept shouting, refusing to acknowledge the sincere advice from those around her, as if only her opinion mattered. Finally, when there was no other way to win the situation, she grabbed her phone and called the police, telling outright lies. She claimed that Tim was a dangerous vagrant, harassing her and making her feel unsafe. Her accusations were completely false because Tim had never done anything harmful or even unpleasant to anyone. But to her, the truth didn't matter. She just wanted to push everything in a direction that benefited herself, even if it meant an injustice against someone else. Those who witnessed the scene could feel the tension in the air, a sense that everything happening was unfair. Her rude attitude not only hurt Tim but also made everyone around feel anger and discomfort. She not only lost trust but also forced those around her to face a situation they didn't want to be part of, a situation that displayed absurdity and injustice. This is the most interesting part of the story. The police arrived at the scene, and the woman immediately started playing the victim, constantly talking about feeling threatened and unsafe with Tim nearby. She tried to make everyone believe she was in a dangerous situation, completely reversing the truth. Her attitude was truly defiant, as if she wanted people to believe Tim was a threat. But Tim, calm as always, accurately recounting the situation without worry, pointed out that he hadn't done anything wrong. Despite this, it was clear that the woman fully expected the police to side with her, to strengthen her false argument. But the surprising part was, the police didn't do that. One of the officers suddenly recognized Tim, making the situation even more interesting. The police officer greeted Tim warmly. "Oh, hi Tim. How's it going?" The officer showed no suspicion or fear, but instead had a friendly attitude, indicating they had known Tim for some time. After a brief chat, it was clear that the officer realized Tim was not a danger but simply a homeless person going through hard times, and had never caused trouble in the park or surrounding area. When the misunderstanding was cleared up, the officer turned to the woman with a stern look and declared firmly, "Ma'am, this is a public park. Tim has as much right to be here as you do." This moment was truly a punch to the woman. She immediately couldn't refute it. The truth was exposed before her, and the police had confirmed that Tim's rights were as important as anyone else's. The contempt and self-centeredness of the woman could no longer continue because even the legal authorities didn't support her unreasonable accusations. Her face completely changed, from smugness to one filled with surprise and panic. She started stammering, her speech no longer as coherent as before, as if she couldn't accept her defeat. She began uttering discriminatory remarks. "It's unacceptable for people like him to be allowed to show up in places like this." Her voice was full of contempt, showing her clear disdain for the homeless, as if they had no rights in society. However, she didn't stop there. She continued demanding the police to do something to get Tim removed, trying to exert pressure and assert her power. But instead of complying with her request, the officer calmly responded with something she probably never expected. "Ma'am, if you keep causing trouble, you'll be the one removed from the park." The officer's words were a shock to the woman, leaving her speechless. In contrast to the attitude she thought she deserved, the police response completely did not support her. The truth had been uncovered. It wasn't her, but she was the one causing trouble, and her actions had crossed the line. Boom! A heavy silence, as if you could hear a pin drop. Everything seemed to pause for a moment, and right after, the change in the atmosphere was palpable. The people in the crowd couldn't hide their amusement, a sense that justice had been restored. They witnessed the perfect failure of this woman, and could feel the joy as she was exposed. The woman sighed, her face no longer holding its arrogance. She hugged her dog, seeking some comfort, but each step she took was clearly one of shame. She had been exposed, not just to the police but to all those who witnessed it. Her own arrogance had led her to a big lesson about respect and the equal rights of everyone. After she left, the atmosphere in the park instantly changed. A few people in the crowd approached Tim, not out of pity, but because they genuinely wanted to show support. They brought Tim food and drinks, showing empathy and humanity that Tim had always maintained. The police officer also stayed a bit longer to make sure everything was okay, not only to protect but also to chat with Tim like old friends. It was a warm scene, a clear sign that this community, while imperfect, still had open-hearted individuals. And then, the moment of satisfaction came. The feeling wasn't just from seeing the woman removed from her position of power, but from the awareness that the voice of justice had been upheld. What she thought was right had now been exposed. Just because you are loud, confrontational, and try to impose unwarranted power doesn't mean you will win, especially when you face a community ready to protect each other. Tim was still there in the park, and now, it seemed like everyone was caring for him more than ever. His presence had become a testament to the fact that everyone, no matter who they are, deserves respect and protection. No one is excluded, and the care shown wasn't an act of charity but a display of fair support, true kindness. Justice had been served, and not only was Tim protected, but so were the values of respect and fairness in this community.